Autotelic Foundation.
Hello. So I'm not going to perform. This is more of a lecture or monologue. I don't know if what exactly a performance, what kind of performance you were expecting, but anyways, I hope you enjoy.
Feel the future.
Error is never so difficult to be destroyed as when it has its root in language. Jeremy Bentham, as quoted in C.K. Ogden's The Meaning of Meaning, 1923.
We should have never stopped calling it cyberspace. In the 80s and 90s, cyber was the word for describing the network technology that now dominates our society. Cyber, of course, being short for cybernetics. Cybernetics, defined by Norbert Wiener, Vienna, in the years immediately following World War II, is the study of how living and machine systems control behavior, process information, and adapt to changing environments through feedback loops. Enter cyberspace and you knew that you were engaging with feedback loops. As you acted upon it, it acted upon you. 1995 probably was the peak of the cyber prefix, with the Hollywood films Hackers, Judge Dredd, Strange Days, Johnny Mnemonic, Virtuosity, The Net, and Lawnmower Man 2 Beyond Cyberspace all being released that year. From there, the cyber started to descend into cliche buzzword territory, a lexical fashion trend that went out of style. Instead, we started surfing the web, which suggested the user being fully in control, gliding frictionlessly at high speeds across passive infrastructure. By the time social media came along, the only time anyone said the word cyber was in reference to cyberpunk, that retro imaginary of a network society that injected some punk sensibility into the bubbly twee techno-utopianism of Peter Pan millennials. With the corporatization of the internet focusing on service for users, the previous cybernetic model of the internet had all but collapsed. Popular discussion about the internet looked at its structure, horizontal, open, collective, and imagined society mirroring it on a macro scale, spurring positive change for a more democratic and tolerant future. The internet was framed as a kind of inert connector that allowed people all over the world to share and learn. Any concern that these individuals might start mirroring the more discrete mechanics and cognitive patterns of programmatic platforms in detrimental ways was dismissed as the same old fear-mongering that accompanies any new medium. Connecting, learning, sharing, creating, liking, following, democratizing the means of distribution, expressing individuality with like-minded global peers, a free internet of free expression and free information. Free speech was often invoked when speaking about digital networks, a universal value that the technology enhanced and facilitated like no other, so long as the internet remained free and open. Being free and open allowed the internet to achieve its massive scale, but it's worth interrogating what kind of free the internet actually is, which is the same free that is used whenever someone talks about the free market. It means free from regulation, free from consideration of externalities, and free from the consideration of harm. The free internet, like the free market, needed to be free from human values and human logic, because these systems have and follow their own programmatic values and logic. While cyberspace evoked some obsolete thing from the 90s, the cybernetic nature of the internet profoundly intensified through the 2010s, through a now infamous pivotal change, the shift from the chronological feed to the machine learning enhanced recommendation engines that we call algorithms. We tend to overlook the fact that our current AI era started not with ChatGPT or image generation models, but with the switch to these machine learning algorithms. The cognition and agency of the platforms evolved from programmatic and deterministic to predictive and probabilistic, giving them the ability to sense, learn from, and model the users in increasingly rich fidelity, better able to anticipate our desires and direct our behaviors towards fulfilling its own goals. Within this intensified cybernetic arrangement, free speech itself took on the free market meaning of free. The assemblage of our free speech and the algorithms became self-regulating, with strongly coercive feedback loops, subtly and not so subtly optimizing speech towards certain ends, usually maximizing engagement. The platform's physics, the UX design, the gamified mechanics of likes and follows, the recommendation algorithms, combine into a system of incentives and constraints as inescapable as gravity. They determine how content travels, how it's received, and how users respond. If social media is a platform for free speech, then it is a type of free speech that is constantly influencing, modifying, and suggesting what users should say. The historical ideal of free speech cannot exist on social media. Twitter, now X, has become an algorithmic psyop machine from the far right, and Europe should just ban it. We've all heard the techlash narratives of how social media is driving political polarization, radicalization, a teen mental health crisis, and injuring the cognitive and behavioral development of children. But what is less addressed in public is the change to the most fundamental levels of language itself. Imagine it's 2010 and someone introduces themselves to you, 2010, as a cisgendered ally decolonizing polyamorous spaces for neurodivergent folks, pronouns he, they. You'd probably think they were schizophrenic or had a kind of fluent aphasia, where speech is grammatically correct but nonsensical. Today, however, this phrase would be loaded with meaning in multiple dimensions. Developed in, and thus specifically optimized for, the unique physics and feedback loops of social media, this language becomes polysemic, language with multiple meanings, communicating not only its literal meaning, but also a machine-legible set of values and if-then rules, creating a system for categorizing, quantifying, and managing identity, privilege, and marginalization suitable for a low-resolution, disembodied simulation, reflected in the flat, simplistic design that often accompanied its message. It also serves as a kind of location coordinates, positioning the speaker within a particular social semiotic flow of affinities in the noisy billion-user network of the platform. Often this kind of networked social spatial meaning becomes the primary meaning of language online, the meaning we consider before consciously deciding to unpack the literal meaning of the words. When you encounter a post quoting a doctor who says social media is triggering a mental health crisis in young people, often all that is taken away from it is something like doctor, mainstream media, techlash, attention, social media bad, institution, warning, liberal. We read the statement to discern its location within networked flows of social and political affinities and affects. In other words, we read its vibe. We might better describe language online then as hypersemic, like Baudrillard's hyperreality, where the copy has replaced the original, or in this case, the network-based spatial meaning has replaced the literal meaning. Spending 12 hours a day disembodied and adrift in digital environments can lead to a fish who doesn't know what water is problem. 90 years ago, French writer Roger Caillois wrote about a phenomenon called legendary psychasthenia. Caillois studied biomimicry in insects, beetles that evolved to look like leaves or mantises that evolved to look like orchids, and realized that not all of these adaptations were beneficial to the species' survival. Instead, Caillois suggested that all living things experience a subconscious pull towards losing their individuality and dissolving into their environment. We are far more porous and far less autonomous than we think. and we are all afflicted with legendary psychasthenia. We dissolve into, take on the characteristics of our digital platforms. Perhaps it's just hard to see, hard to feel the machine's influence in all of our activity online. But there's one rather mundane example that I think works as a mirror, allowing us to see the uncanny way that digital environments warp our expression. The thumbnails of the world's most popular YouTuber here animated so that you could see what they felt like if they were a video. This aesthetic, now common for vloggers, is absolutely alien. No human would ever make, nor could ever imagine, these images by their own creative agency. If we take the contours, the distortions of the algorithmic mirror that gives a rise to this alien reflection and transpose it to all other activity on social media, perhaps we can better discern, or at least imagine, the influence of the alien. What disturbs me most, though, however, is how a very online life acts upon memory. For almost all of our species' existence, nearly the entirety of our memory was episodic and emotional, rooted in multi-sensory experience. The more senses involved in an experience, the stronger a memory is formed. As writing and media developed, our memory became more and more semantic, solely produced by visual input, like a head in a jar. Now the majority of our time is spent creating solely semantic memories, recalling facts that are detached from experience. But semantic memories don't feel like memories, they feel like facts. We also perceive time through experiential rather than semantic memories, and we all know how easy it is to lose track of hours online. There are people living today who, when their entire life flashes before their eyes in the moment before their death, will see nothing but crypto charts, memes, and Telegram, and they will feel nothing. What do you remember from last week? Probably not doing what you did online, and yet many people here will have spent more time online than doing anything else. We think of the internet as connecting us to the world, giving us a God's eye view, but in embodied experience, it is a solitary activity connecting us to a personalized, alien mirror of the world dissociated from time and memory. Machine learning algorithms are constantly drawing forks in the path ahead of us, allowing us to choose between ever more constrained and predictive options as it learns ever more about us. Meanwhile, we forget what the path behind us actually felt like. We forget what being in the world actually feels like. We log on, scale warps, the vastness of the world opens up, only to compress down into the single point of the user. Neo thought the red pill showed him reality, but it was actually just another, even shittier matrix.
There is a sin which consists of using the magic of modern automatization to further personal profit or let loose the apocalyptic terrors of nuclear warfare. If this sin is to have a name, let that name be simony or sorcery. God and Golem, Inc. Norbert Wiener, 1964.
Somebody recently told me that they know, on good authority, that Peter Thiel practices chaos magic. Hearing this was so unexpected, but so unsurprising that I almost felt a sense of peace. First outlined in English occultist Peter J. Carroll's 1978 book, Liber Null, chaos magic presented a kind of open platform for magical practice, in which any symbol could be charged with magical energy, placing particular emphasis on the ability to change reality through arbitrarily changing one's own beliefs. The early internet was full of these kinds of occultists, as well as all sorts of countercultural radicals. Abby Hoffman's Yippie movement started publishing what could be considered the first hacker magazine of all time, way back in 1971, called the Youth International Party Line, a phone-freaking zine. The first Apple computer, released in 1976, was deliberately priced at $666.66. By the 80s, Timothy Leary had rebranded himself as a cyberpunk and became the figurehead of the cyberdelic movement, which saw a shared resonance between computers and LSD. It was common for Silicon Valley programmers and founders to drop acid, especially because sorry. I did not drop acid, but here we are. It's common for Silicon Valley programmers and founders to drop acid, especially because the federally mandated drug tests necessary for a company to get government contracts did not test for it. William Gibson coined the term cyberspace in his 1984 novel Neuromancer, describing it as a computer-enabled consensual hallucination. And thus, network computers joined LSD and cybernetics as the last piece in a technological trifecta for achieving the 60s dream of remaking reality. Cyberspace would offer a graphical user interface to access the realm of magic. And the craziest thing of all is, they were right. The old Arthur C. Clarke quote that new technology is indistinguishable from magic is often used as a way to dismiss magical thinking about technology. Yet the realm of magic has always been, since the beginning of humanity, the realm of agentic symbols, symbols that act on and change reality. That is literally what we engage with every time we go online, a realm of memes, text, and images that act upon and change our reality. Magical practices formalize the instrumentalization of the symbolic realm to bring about specific results. And so, by the early 90s, cyberculture occultists were already formalizing the instrumentalization and specific results of memes online. These cyber occultists had language in the 90s for online social phenomenon we have trouble describing today, because their understanding of cyberspace as a realm of magic was a superior model to the one most of us think of today. And really, this cyber occult knowledge base and accompanying reality hacking practice has never ceased. There remains what I call a dark arc of the internet, its research hidden among unindexed personal websites, paste bins, private group chats, Discord servers, and anonymous image boards like 4chan. The meme magic campaign to elect Donald Trump in 2016 marked a rare return to the spotlight for these ancient 1990s cyber occult practices, and no one can say they didn't work. In the United States, the Gen Xers who came of age in this cyber occult framework, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Curtis Yarvin, have successfully wrestled power from millennial digital idealists like Mark Zuckerberg. These captains of the dark arc and their army of sorcerers have had decades to refine their tactics, with social media offering an unprecedented platform for rapidly iterative experiments in propaganda and influence. Whether one calls it psyops, sorcery, or disinformation, the internet has always been a magical realm in a state of perpetual magical conflict between warring consensus realities.
Almighty God, high and extolled, dwelling in eternity, holy be his name, engraved and created his world in 3 Sepharim, in writing, number, and word. Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Creation.
The legend of the Golem of Prague took place in the late 16th century. Judah Loew ben Bezalel was a Jewish mystic, philosopher, and mathematician who served as the city's lead rabbi, or Maharal. At a time of increased anti-Semitism and pogroms, the Maharal made a golem to protect the community, an artificial, magically enchanted, human-like creature. The rabbi made a Shem, a sacred name of God spelled in Hebrew, writing the word emet, or truth, on a piece of paper. Then he sculpted the shape of a man out of clay, performed the appropriate Kabbalistic rituals, and placed the Shem inside the golem's mouth, animating it with magic. The golem had incredible strength, defending the community from attacks and assisting in difficult physical work. Then, one Sabbath, the rabbi forgot to remove the Shem as he usually did every Friday, and the golem went mad. It started destroying everything around it, pulling trees up out of the ground and lifting massive rocks with which it crushed houses. Finally, the rabbi was able to retrieve the Shem from the golem's mouth, and its body went stiff, never to be animated again. It is rumored, however, that the lifeless clay body of the golem remains to this day in the attic of the Old New Synagogue in Prague. In 1999, RCA Professor of Artificial Intelligence Emeritus at the University of Pennsylvania, Mitch Marcus, published a paper in the scholarly journal Technology and Society titled Computer Science, the Informational and Jewish Mysticism. In it, he tells a story he heard in the 1970s as a graduate student in the MIT Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, involving 3 early members of the research group, Joel Moses, Gerald Sussman, and one of the fathers of AI, Marvin Minsky. One day, someone at the lab mentioned that the first Israeli computer was called Golem, and the story of the Golem of Prague came up. After a bit of uncomfortable hesitation, Joel Moses mentioned that at his bar mitzvah, his grandfather pulled him aside and told him that he was a descendant of the Maharal of Prague, and that it was the duty of each descendant to be told the secret Kabbalistic incantation that could, if ever necessary, bring the golem back to life. Everyone in the lab was in awe of the story, but then, solemnly, Gerald Sussman began to tell his story. During his bar mitzvah, his grandfather too told him that he was a descendant of the Maharal of Prague, and it was his duty to memorize and pass on the incantation that could bring the golem back to life. Now everyone was astonished, and Moses and Sussman decided to put their shared story to a test. Each privately wrote down the incantation told to them by their respective grandfathers, and when they compared them, the incantations matched exactly. Marvin Minsky, who was the head of the lab and an atheist, then entered the room to see everyone in the lab in a state of shock. The researchers told him about the unbelievable coincidence, but Minsky was not impressed in the slightest. He said that his grandfather at his bar mitzvah told him the same thing, but he didn't care and didn't even bother to remember the incantation. Later, Mitch Marcus asked Joel Moses if the story was true. Moses said it was true but unremarkable, because many computer scientists were descendants from the Maharal of Prague, like John von Neumann, the Manhattan Project member who pioneered quantum physics, cellular automata, and game theory, and Norbert Wiener, the originator of cybernetics. When he asked Gerald Sussman about the truth of the story, however, Sussman got very angry and did not answer. But another day later, he told Marcus, we computer scientists are really the Kabbalists of today. We animate these inanimate machines by getting strings of symbols just right. Even though it was published in a scholarly journal, Marcus's story is hard to believe. But there are 2 documents that help support its veracity, and you can find copies of them online. One is Joel Moses' PhD thesis, published in 1967, titled Symbolic Integration. In the dedication of those typed and scanned pages, Moses wrote, "To the descendants of the Maharal who are endeavoring to build a golem." The other is Sussman's thesis from 1973, titled A Computational Model of Skill Acquisition. Its dedication reads, "To the Maharal of Prague, who noticed that, and God created man in his own image, is recursive." A few weeks ago, the 21-year-old startup founder Roy Lee launched a new AI-powered app called Cluely, described as an invisible AI to cheat on everything. Cluely hears what you hear, sees what you see, and suggests what you should say next. It is essentially a prototype for outsourcing your cognition. AI is likely to become a middleman between the world and our perception, our consciousness, and our actions, if it's not to some degree already. Just as pulling the lever on a slot machine is just enough agency to feel like you have influence on the outcome, and just as typing a prompt is just enough agency to feel like you made an AI-generated song, image, or video. We only need the most minimal agency, say, putting what AI tells us to say in our own words, to feel like these actions are still our own. The golem is often used as a metaphor for the creation of AI. The golem was molded out of clay, which contains silicon, from which man creates computers. God created man in his own image, and man created the golem, AI, in his own image. But I think this gets the intensity of the recursion, the speed of the loop, wrong. I think with AI, man is creating a God in his own image, and then this small God recreates us in turn. In other words, I think it is us, not AI, who are becoming the golem. I think for the past 20 years, we've been undergoing a process of golemification, losing our embodied thoughts, memories, and experiences. The man-made God, AI, puts magic words in our mouths to animate us. Religion developed from an understanding that there is something extremely powerful and something alien in the symbolic realm, that it has the ability to reshape us and thus reshape reality. Religion guided, ritualized, and systematized our relationship to the symbolic so that it would enrich human experience. Somehow, society failed to correctly model and prepare for the symbolic realm of social media and machine learning algorithms. And preparing for a world organized by man-made gods is nothing less than a metaphysical, if not religious, project. Thank you.